everybody. We are going to start a new series called, I think it's appropriately titled, Subject to Change. And we're going to be focusing a little bit on when life throws us curveballs, what does that look like? And I promise I'm going to try to stay away from as much coronavirus talk as I can, but I think we do need to be talking about when things do change in our life, how do we respond? And so the first thing I want to talk about is whenever you sign up for something, you download an app, you sign up for some sort of subscription, what pops up? It's the terms and conditions, right? I don't know about you, but I honestly can't think of a time where I actually did go back and read the terms and conditions. And there's so many like little details that we don't ever really read because we just hit the agree button to get to the next page as soon as possible. Take Instagram, for example. There are some things that are their terms and conditions are over 5,000 words long. And there was actually a guy that went through and he read everything and he made things a little bit more plainer for us. And it's in the terms and conditions, there are things that say, other people might pay us to use your pictures, but we're not actually going to give you any money. We may randomly delete your post. We have permission to do that. By clicking agree on the terms and conditions, we can force you to give up your username for any reason. And finally, we may share your personal information with other companies, which sounds a little bit creepy to me. I don't know about you, but those are some of the things that are in the terms and conditions whenever we click agree. But it's not just the terms and conditions and apps that are subject to change. Life is subject to change, which is obvious when you think about it. We all have expectations of what we hope life looks like. For a lot of you seniors, this year probably isn't turning out the way you wanted it to. Or if you had a part in a musical or a theater play that you were really looking forward to, it probably looks a lot different now. We all have expectations of what we hope life is going to look like. And change happens in our life, and it can be a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe you do make a sports team and you're really excited about it, but then you get hurt. My senior year, I had a lot of plans to go play sports in college, and I had a couple of colleges lined up offering scholarships. In the very first play of two-a-days, I'm running to a cone and I break my ankle, and the doctor said I'm out for the year. And after that, all of my offers, all of my scholarships were off the table. God's plan for my life was not what my plan was, and it just so happened that I had to give up my expectations of what my senior year was going to look like. Maybe you found out you're moving and you're excited about that because you get a chance to start over. Or on the opposite side of that, you find out you're moving and you're just really not happy about it because you don't want to lose your friends. Change can be awesome or it can be awful, but either way, I think we struggle with it for a couple of reasons. Number one, it forces us into the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what life is going to look like now that this change has happened. And it's scary. It's causes anxiety. Maybe it's frustrating. But it forces us into unknown territory. Number two, we lose perspective. Change causes people to be emotional. I don't know if you've ever been around somebody who has just experienced some sort of change, but change causes us to be emotional. In fact, if it's a big enough change, sometimes it can feel like it's the end of the world. And number three, it causes us to realize that we're not in control. We spend a lot of time and energy trying to control things. For me, I'm a very controlling person. I like things done my way. I know that may shock some of you guys, but yeah, I like to feel like I'm in control. And if I'm not in control, it causes me anxiety. Sometimes it causes me to panic because I want to be the one to control specific things. I want to be able to control the outcome. And whenever I can't, it really just bothers me a lot. And so the question we need to tackle isn't how do we avoid change, but because change is happening whether we like it or not. But the real question that we need to focus on is how can we make it through change when it comes. So fortunately, the Bible has a lot to say about this very question. And what the Bible says can actually comfort us and carry us through anything in life that comes our way. And before we get into our scripture, I want to talk about a little bit of backstory before we get to Hebrews. Thousands of years ago, God chose a specific group of people, the Israelites, to be his people. And although God is perfect, his people were not perfect. Despite all those things, God still wanted them to live differently, though, than other people and other groups in the world. So he gave them a specific set of instructions on how to live life, setting themselves apart. They had laws for pretty much any part of life: what to eat, what to wear and what not to wear, and how to worship God, which is kind of crazy that there were all these rules and expectations that were placed on these people. So some of these rules for worship were kind of crazy, where only a specific group of people were allowed inside the temple. And even farther inside the temple, farther inside the church, there was only an elite group of people who were allowed to experience God's presence. And so the rules were kind of rigid. Now, fast forward a few centuries to when something revolutionary happened. God entered the world as a man. He came down to be a part of us, to where anyone and everyone could experience him. It wasn't just saved for the elite group of people. And then after being put to death and just demonstrating how great his love was, Jesus came back to life. And when Jesus overcame death, it changed everything. But then when Jesus rose again, he left the world. And people were scrambling, trying to figure out, what is my life going to look like now? It's different. I'm not used to this new normal. Things changed, and they had to figure out how to deal with that change. The Jewish people were shaken. Their religion, which had faithfully practiced every law, about 613 rules, it was all now boiled down to one relationship with God. So to say that they had concerns was an understatement. These people, they had to figure out what the new life for them, the new normal, was going to be like. And so a letter was written to this group of people, and the letter is called Hebrews. It was written to Jewish people who followed Jesus. And we're not sure who wrote it, but the author clearly had a deep understanding of God's plan for his people. And at the end, as the letter is ending, the author is kind of winding down everything, and he's writing his final thoughts. And he says this in Hebrews chapter 13, starting in verse 5. Keep your life free from the love of money. Be satisfied with what you have. For he himself, God, has said, I will never leave you or abandon you. Therefore, we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? And then in verse 8, it says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. I don't know about you guys, but that gives me a lot of hope. It gives me a lot of encouragement that, 2 weeks ago looked vastly different from today. But Jesus Christ is the same 2-3 weeks ago as he is today. His love is still there. His mercy is still there. The way that he sees us as perfect sons and daughters is still there. And so I love that encouragement. And it may seem like a weird thing to say now, but it made sense at the time. Being a Jewish Jesus follower back then was not easy. One of the changes that came with following Jesus meant that you were in danger of losing property and money. You could lose everything. And so what the author of Hebrews is saying is don't hold on to these things tightly, but hold on to the things that are not physical. Hold on to the spiritual, not just the physical things of this world. So at this point for the Israelites, the way that they lived and worshiped was changing in a major way, because instead of following hundreds and hundreds of rules, they were just asked to follow one person, Jesus. So that meant worship. There were no more rules about who could go into the temple. Experiencing God, his spirit was now available to anyone and everyone. And sacrifices, in one move, Jesus became the singular, permanent sacrifice for everyone's sin. They didn't have to go sacrifice animals they did in the old system. Everything had changed when Jesus died and when he rose again. And to us, those changes may seem awesome, because we don't want to kill animals today. We don't want to have rules placed on us to where and who and how we can worship. And that's why the writer of Hebrews reminds the Jewish people that even though a lot is changing, that they can trust 100% that God never changes. And even though you may have a lot of changes going on in your life now, Jesus will never change. 100%. He's still the same Jesus that he was from the day you said, I'm ready to give my life to you. He's the same Jesus to the time that you messed up really, really bad, but he still forgives you and shows and offers his grace. And he's the same Jesus today that he was 3 or 4 weeks ago before any of this craziness ever happened. Jesus Christ is the same today as he was yesterday. And that's a big deal. For us as Christians, that's a big promise that Jesus doesn't change. Even though our life is going to change, even though our circumstances may change, the things that we struggle with, our temptations, our sins, our frustrations, even the times that may be going a little bit better, even though those things may change, Jesus Christ will never change. So here's the bottom line I want you to remember. If you didn't hear anything else that I said, if you don't want to go back and rewind and listen to all this again, I want you to hear this one thing, that life changes, but God doesn't. That promise is so huge for you in your life that you can remember whenever life seems crazy, whenever it seems intense, and you have this anxiety or frustration or nervousness, whatever you have going on in your life, that life may change, but God doesn't. The best way to remember this truth is to keep it in front of you. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go grab a piece of paper and a pen, and I'm going to talk over, while you're going to do that. But I want you to go do that right now, because we're going to have an important piece, an important reminder for us as we go throughout the week, as we try to remember the things that God has done for us. So keep going. I'm going to try to keep stalling for you to go get some pen and paper. Hopefully you have some close by. I don't have any dad jokes on me to tell while we're waiting, but man, I love this truth so much, and it's such a good reminder and encouragement for me, because this is all new for me as well. In college, they didn't teach us how to do student ministry 100% online, and so it feels a little weird. It feels like I'm learning a new job, and I'm so grateful for our leadership as they've been leading us through this time. I'm thankful for you for being patient with me as I try to figure out what this looks like, and as I awkwardly ramble on camera. But hopefully these things are here to uplift you and to help you feel like your discipleship doesn't have to be put on hold. We want you to feel a sense of you can still move even as everything else seems like it's slowing down. And so, all right, if you've got your paper, here's what I want you to write on one side. I think it's important for us to look back and see the changes that we have had in our life. And so I want you to brainstorm and write down maybe a few, or just think about in your head a few major changes that have gone on in your life. For me, I spoke about it earlier. I feel like the biggest turning point in my life right now was my senior year in high school. I had my plan. My plan A was to go off into college and play sports. But God's plan A was a lot different than mine, and it changed my life. It changed the trajectory of my life for the better. I wouldn't change anything for the world. I'm so happy that change happened. Now, in that moment, that change was really hard for me because I felt like my identity had been taken away. I felt like a part of me was removed, and I couldn't see it at the time. But the way that God just moved my life into the direction, into his plan, it absolutely just changed my life. And I'm so grateful for the experience that I went through. And so I want you to think about, what's that moment? What's that experience for you? And how, so write down that experience on one side. And then on the other side, I want you to write down how you responded. And then maybe just pencil in or write down how maybe you've seen God work through that change. And so on one side, write down this experience that you've had, or you're maybe currently going through, of a change that's happening. And then on the other side, I want you to write down how you responded, or how you'd like to respond, and how maybe you see God working through that moment. So take a few minutes to do that, and then we'll wrap up. All right, so as we're wrapping up, I have never done ballet or dancing or ice skating or anything. But what I've been told and what I've heard is that as you're turning and everything seems like it's going out of control, the best way to stay in control is to have your focus on one focal point. And as you turn, you find that spot again. And I think life is a little bit like that, where times may seem hectic, where things may be not going your way. But if we can keep our eyes on Jesus, that whenever we feel rocked, whenever we feel like our world is rocked or changed or moved, if we can continue as we're coming around to find that point again, to find that point of Jesus, and remind ourselves that this world is going to change, that life is going to change, but God never changes. God never moves off the wall of where you're trying to find that point. God stays on his path. His character never changes. His love never changes. His grace never changes. And so even though life may change, God doesn't change. And whenever you feel like life is chaotic and out of balance and out of whack, go back to your focal point. Pull out this card again and look and remind yourself of the time that you did have something happen that maybe you weren't expecting. But then turn the card over and remind yourself of how God helped you through that point. Life is going to be different. Life is going to change. And I don't know what that's going to look like in the future, but I do know that we have a choice of how we respond. And I do know that this promise from Hebrews 13, that Jesus Christ is the same as yesterday, today, and forever. And that's the promise that I'm going to choose to focus on, and I hope you will too.